now, so everyone kind of can welcome everyone. We appreciate everyone for being here for this July monthly webinar. This month's topic is about diffusing conflict, and I'm sure that all of us are very familiar with that. So I'd like to first turn it over so Amy Kelley can wave to everyone, so everyone knows what Amy looks like. Amy was very helpful in putting all of this together. As we start, it's very important that we know, even though we are all seasoned veterans or brand new on the job, we obviously face tense situations, whether we are in school outreach or club work or just in our office working with a coworker that may see things from a different viewpoint than we do. So it's always important, regardless of experience, that we learn how to make sure that we're listening to the other person and then trying to attempt to diffuse the situation so that we can have a productive from this. So if everybody wouldn't mind, please hit mute. We will have time for different scenarios back and forth so we can all kind of jump in. So everybody, if you wouldn't mind, hit mute, and then I will turn it over to Amy.
Okay, I'm looking at the chat box. Is everybody able to hear us? I see a lot of comments that people aren't able to.
And he's like, they're better with kids. You know, he's like, I don't mind doing new things or trying new things. He goes,
and like Lacey mentioned, if y'all that have your microphones on, if you could please mute them.
Like, make that kid like remember that and then never want to go to the dentist. So he goes, I have two people I refer to. And I'll be honest with you, he goes, the one does a great job.
Okay, some people say their sound is working. All right, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Like I said, again, if those of you that don't have your microphones muted, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and doing so, because we will have chances for interaction, but for some reason, I know on my end, it makes it sound
really good. Yeah. Huh? Pottsville.
No, you said Pottsville, but
yeah.
Whichever one. Either way. Yeah, it's kind of the same.
And what you will see, if everyone has the go-to meeting popped up, you'll see, hopefully you'll see an audio button that looks like a microphone. If you want, just go ahead and click that and it should go to orange.
All right, so there's Lacey and I. Like I said, Lacey mentioned I work for CSU Extension. I work in southeastern Colorado in Cheyenne County, and Lacey's up in Adams County in the Denver area. All right. So Lacey had mentioned about identifying a tense situation. We face a variety of those, so it's good to have some ideas of how to handle conflict. So why is it important to deal with angry people instead of just run? Because I know sometimes it seems easier to hide in our offices during fear or avoid answering emails, that sort of thing. But why it's important to handle it rather than run is to have those skill sets to be able to deal with angry people for a number of reasons. First, if you can calm them down, it's easier to be able to keep them from taking actions that could harm you or harm others. I'm sure we've all been in those situations where you thought, oh no, they're going to throw a punch or do some sort of damage to something. So either whether it be physical or emotional damage to themselves, to someone else, easy way to be able to cause a situation to spiral out of control. And so if you can solve that underlying problem that caused the anger, it's easier to resolve the situation. Secondly, if you respond angrily to someone else, so if you respond in anger, it can easily become the aggressor. So if you have a situation where somebody comes at you and they're very upset, I'm sure we can all think of, in your mind right now, think of those situations. But if you escalate back with anger or respond with anger, the situation can just totally spiral out of control. So if you respond in a calm manner, then that's a good chance that it'll kind of diffuse the situation. Third, focus on positive relationships. In Extension, we are very much in the relationship building. So if you respond well to angry people, you'll help kind of build a positive relationship with them. And then hopefully you'll experience less stress and unhappiness with how you dealt with it. It'll help kind of make them seem like they want to maybe deal with you in a more positive way, kind of removes that anger. And finally, when you respond calmly to angry episodes, you set good examples for others. It can inspire those around you to not handle a situation in an aggressive way. And especially in team situations, you may kind of create a different situation on dealing with this. Remember, we're here for youth development first and adults second. So knowing how to positively handle conflict, you're really a good example.
I will tell her that. I will tell her that.
Yes, whoever then mentioned comment, there is somebody that's speaking that, hasn't muted.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt everyone. Jennifer Keller, I'm sorry.
I knew how I would.
Do you mind trying to hit mute? I'm terribly sorry.
2 weeks when we go back.
Yeah, there's not a way, or I would try. All right. Let's see. All right. We found a little video we wanted to show you. It's how to diffuse a difficult situation in just 5 words.
There's a simple sentence that can help you when you're in the middle of a difficult situation or even an argument with someone to help get a new perspective on things. And that perspective is so vital. You know, Stephen Covey talked about the importance of perspective in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You may be familiar with the story about the gentleman who gets on the train and his kids are acting crazy and someone says to him, hey, why can't you make the kids behave? And he explains that, well, they just got some really bad news about it. I think it had been a car accident or something like that. Anyway, there was some sort of really bad news that was affecting his behavior, his ability to control his kids, and also his children's behavior. In a split second, the person talking to the gentleman had a shift in perspective. Now, nothing changed. The kids were still acting up, and the father still didn't know what to do to help them. But in that instant, there was a moment of awareness and a moment of understanding that shifted the whole scenario. Similarly.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry. I'll try to turn up the volume real quick. 1 second. I apologize. And then I'll start it again. All right. Hopefully it doesn't blast everyone out. Oh, maybe to be smarter than technology. Okay. Sorry.
There's a simple sentence that can help you when you're in the middle of a difficult situation or even an argument with someone to help get a new perspective on things. And that perspective is so vital. You know, Stephen Covey talked about the importance of perspective in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You may be familiar with the story about the gentleman who gets on the train and his kids are acting crazy and someone says to him, hey, why can't you make your kids behave? And he explains that, well, they just got some really bad news about it. I think it had been in a car.
Oh, technology is not always our friend. Sorry.
In his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You may be familiar with the story about the gentleman who gets on the train and his kids are acting crazy and someone says to him, hey, why can't you make your kids behave? And he explains that, well, they just got some really bad news about it. I think it had been in a car accident or something like that. Anyway, there was some sort of really bad news that was affecting his behavior, his ability to control his kids, and also his children's behavior. In a split second, the person talking to the gentleman had a shift in perspective. Now, nothing changed. The kids were still acting up, and the father still didn't know what to do to help them. But in that instant, there was a moment of awareness and a moment of understanding that shifted the whole scenario. Similarly, you can have that same kind of shift if you're in a difficult situation by using these 5 words. When you're approaching your boss, when you're talking with your spouse or your partner, think of these 5 words. What else could this mean? What else could this mean? Observe behavior and we think we know exactly why we are seeing this behavior. Oftentimes, when our imagination runs wild, our reasoning is projecting a worst-case scenario. maybe that worst case scenario is what you should expect and prepare for. But my question to you is, what else could this be? Those 5 words can change your perspective and give you a new insight into the situation at hand. Now, it may not solve your problem, but it can make you better equipped to address the issues that you're facing.
All right. So that kind of maybe gives you a little idea about a different way to consider a tense situation. Like give you a little food for thought. So not all anger is created equally. So we all are aware of normal anger, you know, that in your face, upset, angry individuals really upset at you. But I'm sure we're also familiar with the passive aggressive form of it. It says a little quote there. I'm going to leave special quotes and sayings on Facebook. Instead of confronting my friends about problems, that's so much cooler. So I'm sure we're all kind of aware of some passive aggressive forms of anger. But does anybody, I guess, have anything? I'll give you a couple examples, but because sometimes it's really kind of implicit or indirect and hard to discover, but one that sticks out is the silent treatment, where, you know, people don't speak to you, they refuse to answer your questions. Maybe it's in person or email. And then another one is the subtle insults. It doesn't seem like they're really insulting you, but it's kind of that disguised insult for maybe, for example, if you turn in a report to your supervisor, they read it and tell you did a good job, which is a compliment, but then they turn around and say, well, it was almost as good as, you know, your coworker, maybe Jamie's. And so it's kind of has that little hidden insult in there. Does anybody else have maybe some examples of some passive aggressive behaviors that you've seen as an extension agent? Not that we've ever seen any. A few seconds. Some other ones, examples that I found were stubbornness. While that can be beneficial, but it can also be a way to subconsciously or punish people. So, you know, if they drag their feet, if you have, I know we have those 4-H families that drag their feet on deadlines all the time or are stubborn about changes maybe to the 4-H program. And so that could be a type of passive aggressive. Failure to finish required tasks, you know, falls into that same thing about procrastination. Refusing to do what they're told. You know, you have those requirements and they purposely don't. So when it comes to dealing with passive aggressive, it can be hard to come up with good ways to deal with it. So most effective approach is to ignore the behavior and pretend you don't notice it. So I know that seems sometimes easier said than done. You want to acknowledge it and get them to correct it. But if it doesn't appear to affect you, there's not much in it for them and they may stop. So if you have that kind of cut them off at the pass and ignore it, but there's sometimes that's not feasible, especially when it comes to deadlines or them ignoring requests that you give them. So when it's not feasible, the best you can do is maintain a distance from that person. Or also, you know, if it's in terms of being a coworker, maybe you ask to not have to be right next to them. But if kind of limit your interactions, and that's not always reasonable for us as extension agents. So one of the things to do is simply be aware of the different types of passive aggressive behavior, and then you're more likely to be able to identify it and remove yourself from the situation. Like another example is, I was only joking. I'm sure you've had people say something that you felt was hostile. Let them know that you didn't find it as a joke, and you know, you didn't find it funny if ignoring it isn't possible. All right. I'll turn it over to Lacey for talk about calming the anger.
Okay, so obviously we've all been in this situation. If you haven't been in a heated conversation, you are a very lucky individual, especially in extension. So one of the main things that I encounter, there are 2 ways that I've encountered it, whether it's been at the county fair or anything involving club work. And then another one is working with schools and outreach and say that there are kids that are running late or there was a miscommunication on a program start time. We've all been there. And someone, if they do come up to you in the normal approach, wanting to confront the issue, we can see that there are 5 easy steps. And I'd like to give kudos to Yvonne from Michigan State for providing this information. I was really pleased to see just how much information that Extension does put out there, especially Michigan State. So I'd like to give a shout out to Michigan State. The first step, when you're dealing with someone that is trying to be aggressive or is upset, state the facts. Leave out emotion. State only the data that you know that is to be true. If you have a question on a number, if you're not 100% positive, don't even use that information. Go with the deadline was at this time at 4:30. I was in the office until 5 o'clock. One of those. Make sure that you only are stating the truth, the facts about that. Making sure, because if you use your interpretation rather than the fact, it can easily be construed. The next thing, moving into impact. Describe how the situation is affecting you emotionally or otherwise. And then make sure that you're not accusing them of, so if a person comes up to you and says, hey, we missed this deadline, or you put my daughter's goat in the wrong weight class, go back, and if they are heated, say, right now that tone is a little too aggressive. Let's work on focusing on the fact is the goat weighed this. Here is the weigh sheet. The goat should be in this class range from 75 to 78 pounds. Your goat weighed that. The weighmaster, the superintendent, all of these were verified. Go through and talk about that and say, we need to focus on what the impact here is. We need to make sure that everyone is on a consistent playing field. Then it goes into your desired outcome. So the parent or the family member wants, obviously that goat, we're going to use that as the continued example. That goat wants to be in a heavier or a lighter class, whatever their prerogative is. You say, if we did move it, that would mean that all of the other kids that are showing goats would be in a different class, and then nothing would be on the same level playing field. The desired outcome is positive youth development. And that's where you come back and say, the outcome for this program is whatever the example may be. But at the end of the day, as 4-H educators, our goal is to teach youth to deal with situations, whether they are easy or challenging. And that's, at the end of the day, positive youth development. And then, if people are still trying to circle around back to not getting their way or trying to provide conflict, question them. Ask them how the other person perceives the situation, and then truly listen to their response. Because if you listen, you'll typically figure out what is going on. You'll figure out, back to that video that we watched, there's something else that's going on to push them to this. Sometimes family members will be in the same class, and then they'll have to be competing against one another. And parents will sometimes want to see that divided. Well, there are certain steps that they have to take up to the event, up to the county fair, to see that those kids, those goats, back to that example, that those goats would weigh different. So make sure that you continually question and say, well, what would you like to see as the outcome? What would you do if the situation was reversed and put into another family? Just make sure you ask them. Then, once you've heard the question, once you've deciphered what that means, paraphrase back their response to them and say, well, this is how I interpreted it. Is this your perspective as the way that you just explained this to me? Are these are the words that I heard, and this is how I understand what you're trying to explain to me. So then, moving into our next situation, we wanted to take an opportunity to give a scenario. And what we want you all to do, and I know some people may be more comfortable typing in a box, in the comment box, or some people would be comfortable speaking. We'd like to get your feedback, as we all know that we all face different issues, but at the end of the day, we all face issues. So our first scenario, Amy and I are going to work through this one together because this is actually something that we've gone through. We used to work together in the same area, and so we want to go over this with you. So we're working in a team environment, and there are 3 other educators that are helping host the county fair. Your role specifically, which would be my role, is to host the project interview day. However, the livestock parents, which are not the general projects or consumer projects, frequently come and interrupt the day because they are frustrated that another member of the team, the livestock educator, does not have any livestock background. You have identified that educator, you personally, that that person is a little apprehensive about their livestock knowledge, and they also do not like conflict or dealing with the public, which obviously makes it a challenge in extension. The county director recently told you individually that the livestock agent was overwhelmed and we all need to work together to help one another, especially the livestock agent. You already put in the 14 to 18 hours a day, and the livestock agent has barely been in the office from vacation. How do you, as a team member, how do you handle that? Amy, do you have some initial thoughts that you'd like to throw in there?
Well, if you're going through the steps, so you would know the facts. So you would go through and pick out the facts being project interview day, and you can't really say the fact being that the livestock parents frequently interrupt it, but you can do facts with that the county director told you the person was overwhelmed and that you needed to get along. And then the only fact that you can say is that you put in the long hour days, because the thought that you think that the livestock agent's barely been in the office you don't necessarily know for sure what they're doing. So and then impact would be more on the impact it has. You know that it has an impact on the livestock parents and the livestock kids, and then also has an impact on you. And then I guess desired outcome, I'll turn that back over to you.
So when in that situation, it is always so very important to remember at the end of the day, the impact. Even though you are tied up in day by day, it's important to break it down step by step and say, all right, at the end of the day, the first step is having the project interview day. And that's the first step that you have to tell those parents and say, the livestock parents, at this time, this is the event that's going. We need to work together to make sure that these kids are taken care of first, because at the end of the fair, each piece is very important. So the first step is talking to livestock parents and saying, this is where we're at right now. Then what I would recommend doing is trying to work with that livestock agent, sit them down and visit with them and say, what can you do? What can I do to help you? Where can I, and sometimes, as you all are well aware in our office, sometimes it's easier to do things ourselves just because we know we have to get it done. And it's a learning process, especially if you're brand new to the county fair. It's a huge learning curve. And the most important is just to go there and offer help. Throw yourself into helping them. And yes, I know it may be adding one more thing, but remember, this is 1 week or it's 1 day. And then after the situation has fallen down, always remember, keep your cool. Absolutely keep your cool. And then after the whole fair is over, go back and say, all right, these are the things that I saw. These are the areas where I think I could help more or I could help less. And then make a game plan so that in the following county fair or the following big event, whatever it may be, that you guys go in together as a team, as the 4-person team, the 3-person team, the 2-person team, and go from there. So the next step that Amy and I'd like to do is have you all go into our second scenario. And we're just going to give you guys a couple minutes just to kind of think. Your county director has recently retired, and there is one inter-office educator who strongly wishes to move into that role. However, she has had a history of hostile work environment actions to you and your fellow educators. The Human Resources Director, so think of whether you have human resources on the county level or on the state level, has told you that nothing can be proven. So if you have voiced those frustrations to your human resources and they said, well, there's nothing that can be tangible, you're a little bit frustrated. So thinking back to you, you enjoy your work role and the community that you serve. The fellow educator seems untouchable and will be placed as interim director. How do you approach this new office direction with that director? So just going to give you all just a few minutes, and then we want to see some of your responses. And please know we're not trying to probe, we're just trying to snowball and get ideas and share those.
Yeah, and kind of using those, if you know the 5 steps too, will give you kind of some ideas. Oh, good, we're getting some responses.
That is an excellent. I would begin to document everything I feel might not be work. Excellent.
Yeah, and a couple other ones above there. Michael Martin also mentioned documentation. Document your contributions and accomplishments. Yeah. And have witnesses. I think that's key too. Caitlin mentioned sticking to the facts, Yeah, especially when you're making accusations. Again, documenting. Yep, definitely. I think that's really the key part.
Oh, I like that one. Jennifer Hancock's with documentation. I send myself an email so it is time stamped and I keep it in a folder in my inbox. That's perfect. So without giving anything away, has anyone seen this in their state or their program where they've had someone being promoted into where it seems like it's frustrating when someone has done something so wrong continuously and then yet they seem to be promoted? I know that can definitely be a challenge, and at the end of the day, it's so important to remember to balance, one, your role with focusing on youth development, and then 2, finding that work-life balance. What can you do to make sure that you leave work at work? It's always very, very important to do that.
I like the idea of CCing your emails because I think sometimes we don't think about doing that, but that kind of adds that witness part to it. Somebody else that can be a witness to it.
These are great. These are great.
Right. Any others? If not, we can move on.
There's one, Amy.
Oh. I know sometimes it's hard to type that. Oh, you bring up a good point, Michael, that you can be labeled difficult, yeah, instead of the actual perpetrator. And I have seen that oftentimes, even examples I can think of off the top of my head, but definitely I think sometimes, you don't get that support that you actually need. And I like that. Setting up a meeting over coffee, I like it. Out of office with new county director, kind of move forward. Yeah. That is a good point. Maybe try to change roles a little bit. Let them know that you want to work with them and kind of put the ball in their court. I like that idea. Any others? If not, y'all had some really good ideas. In fact, I even jotted some of them down. Lacey, do you want to talk about your
Yeah.
100-0 principle?
A few years ago, our former Colorado 4-H program leader, Jeff Goodwin, in Colorado, we typically have an annual get-together of all extension educators, program assistants, top to bottom, everywhere across the state, from east to west. And each year, he would always try to find one very positive tool to bring to agents, just so they could find something in their programming, to find a peace of mind in their programming. Because as we all know, we have challenges, especially with working with people. And one of them that he brought to us a few years ago was Al Ritter's 100-0 principle, The Secret of Great Relationships. And this book was very important in just looking at the way that we program. And the entire outlook of it was, when we look at some of our relationships, whether they're work or personal, we typically are looking at entering that relationship for a benefit in order to get something. Obviously, we're trying to establish something by building that relationship. In reality, the only way a relationship will last is if you see your relationship as a place that you go to give and not a place that you go to take. And that's a quote by Anthony Robbins. And it's so important that, as we know, working with youth, we are there for positive youth development. And as much as we receive from those youth, I mean, as far as we receive such an intrinsic value of, it warms our heart. That'd be extrinsic. So one of those things, that's why we're typically in this role. So thinking about taking the 100-0 principle into these conflict roles, step one, determine what you can do to make the relationship work, and then do it. Demonstrate respect and kindness to the other person, whether they deserve it or not, which is always so very challenging, especially when someone is in your face and yelling, or being incredibly passive and posting rants on Facebook or social media saying this person knows nothing about 4-H and is depleting the program. It is always so important for us as individuals to treat them with respect and kindness. And that goes into going into step number 2. Do not expect anything in return. And as much as I know, I've caught myself frequently thinking, oh, if I work really hard, maybe they'll just give me a break. If I'm always at all these meetings and all these events and they see me, they'll give me a break. But that's the wrong attitude for me to take, because I know that their reactions are not based on my activity or what my efforts are. Their reactions are solely theirs, and the only person that can walk away feeling positive or negative is myself. So going into step 3, do not allow anything that other person says or does to affect you. In other words, don't take the bait. It's so easy when we're in a conflict to take things personally, to go on an emotional level. And for those of us that have done the color code, I'm very blue. So I know that when people will try to attack a program or something, they'll try to make it personal. And it's so important for me to process that and say, all right, what is really going on? Are they upset with their kid not getting to participate? Are they upset with the cost? What's going on with, why are they upset? And then going back and being persistent with graciousness and kindness. Oftentimes we give up too soon. And sometimes when you're in the middle of an event and someone is hollering at you, you wait and you're good for about 5 minutes, and then something hits you and you become upset again. Don't give up. Walk away completely when the event is done. Let it process, and then you can respond. Take a breath. You always have time. You can always take a breath. You do not have to make a snap or rash decision. And then it's important to remember to expect nothing in return. And that's why it's so important, this 100-0 principle, because you're giving yourself. And at the end of the day, it sometimes may be hard, but remember that it's you that's putting forth that effort. It's you that you can walk away and say, I didn't judge that person, and guess what? Somebody else saw me behaving in that way, and whether it's a youth or another volunteer, and they saw you responding in a positive, consistent, gracious way, that's going to impact them at some time down the future. And you just always have to remember that at the end of the day, it's up to you. And we're a product of our choices, and we choose to be in this job. So moving on into our next slide, which is a bit of a wrap-up. I pulled some of this information. I pulled from a lot of different sources, and one of these was from Forbes, which was surprising. But when we're looking at diffusing, obviously the first thing is, remember, it's all about timing. Timing is key to everything that we do. If you're in the middle of an event and someone is hollering at you, is it the right time to respond right then and say, I can't? You can either say, well, right now I have some other activities that are going on. We will circle back to this, and then follow through on that. Follow through and make sure that those people they are given the time so they can air their frustrations, and then if it becomes a habit, then you can say, we have already covered that. Unfortunately, this matter is closed. And it's always, so just remember, all about right timing. If you feel something is off, don't respond in such a way that's rash. Respond in, we can come back to this, or I have a few moments here in 5 minutes, but make sure you follow through on that. Going into know your boundaries. Identify those behavioral tendencies that seem to trigger certain attitudes. If you are running around all the time, people sometimes will often say, oh, well, you can never catch them. Set specifics. Know that you can engage in coaching and learning going through this diffusing. You can say, all right, well, this is where I understand where you're coming from. This is where I am coming from. I either have to follow this protocol from the state, from federal, or this is a county. Just make sure that you set those boundaries and then follow through on them. Respect differences. So with our audiences, we deal with varied socioeconomic, cultural differences. Always know that there are certain people, technological differences. When you have some deadlines that are set and you say, well, everything has to be filled out using Google Docs or 4-H Online, everything has to be going through there. If someone is financially impoverished and they cannot get to a computer, make sure you're making the point to say, we have these opportunities. Come into the office, go into the local library. Make sure that you are respecting those differences and understanding that just because you are technologically advanced doesn't mean that someone else is. And then make sure, to me, this is the most important. Confront the tension. Now, by confronting it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you go in there and say, this is ridiculous, this is wrong. But it also doesn't mean that you just leave it hanging and then it just continues to build. If there is an issue, it needs to be addressed. It goes back to that timing. How do you address the issue? Is it right then? Is it a little bit after the fact? Is it gather all the facts and then go and sit down and do it? You just have to figure out how you can confront the issue, and then you must confront it. Because if you do not, I'm sure all of you have seen situations build and then they explode, and then it's bigger work, longer work, and more cleanup than you really have time or effort or energy for. So it's very important to know your timing, know your limitations, respect the differences, and then make sure you're confronting it.
Absolutely. Okay, and somebody had mentioned in the chat box if it's a public setting and the person, whether it be a volunteer, parent, whoever, community member, has a blow up and it's very negative behavior, I agree, you have to handle it sooner than later. And that's important when it comes back to, remaining calm, don't respond in anger, because that'll just escalate the situation. And try to set a good example, of how to calmly handle a situation. I agree, though, if it's we're in, like mentioned, we're in the youth development, so if this is gonna potentially have a negative impact on the kids, we definitely need to confront it immediately before it really gets out of hand. And I believe, not coming up, there it goes. Some additional resources out there. YouTube is full of, especially I think of like staff meetings, that sort of thing, having some YouTube videos maybe that either you personally can watch or that you have your group watch. Give us some ideas, more ideas on conflict resolution. Lots of different resources out there on the internet that deal with conflict resolution. So I recommend, especially if you're like me, I dislike conflict, kind of having certain strategies in place. My fair starts in 2 weeks, so definitely honing up on my how to deal with difficult people. Next part. Are there any questions anybody may have?
And Amy and I wanted to, we know that a lot of this information you already have and you've already applied it to your work, but it's always good just to have a little refresher, because I know right now in some of the western states and some of the eastern states, we have a lot of county fairs that are just getting ready to hit. So it's always good just to have these little pointers and tips to just rehash over and say, okay, I know I'm getting ready to go into this big event. Here we go. Let's remember that at the end of the day, conflict is just that. It passes, and in 5 years will this matter? In 5 minutes will this matter? Just mind your P's and Q's and just really focus on listening to what the person is trying to do, and you'll figure it out. It doesn't take long to figure out where a person is coming from if they are trying to address an issue that they feel is off. So we know that obviously a lot of you have county fairs, a lot of you have camps, a lot of you deal with teachers. We just wanted to give a little bit of, hey, guess what? You're going to deal with conflict and you can do it. You absolutely can.
Okay. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I guess, well, thank you to those of you that joined in on our webinar. And I guess, Lacey, do you have any last as the chair
and
wrap up?
This is where I promote. Here's my plug. So we are, as you are probably well aware, thank you for signing up for this. We have been hosting monthly webinars for the last few years, and we are always looking for new webinar proposals. So you will see an email from myself or John over the next few days, and it'll have the evaluation for this, just so we can get some typical feedback of a presentation. And then it'll also give a link to where, if you're interested in submitting a proposal, because these are easy, accessible, and they do count for national. You can work with your state office or your county or regional director. These do count toward your end of the performance appraisals. And so we'd love to have more people. If you submit a proposal, we'd love to connect you with a task force so that you could go through a proposal route. So once again, our next one, they're always the third Wednesday of the month. So we look forward to everyone. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact us.
Lacey, do you know how they get the link to be able to watch the recording?
Yes, the link is as soon as I hit in the recording, what I will do is I will send it to John, our executive director, and then it will be on. Is everybody familiar with the NAE4HA website? What you'll do is you'll see the professional development tab in the middle of the page. You'll click on the professional development tab. You'll scroll down, you'll see virtual professional development webinar, You'll click on that and you'll see all of the archives from this year.
Awesome. All right. All right. Thank you all for joining us.
Yes, we really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.